Hi, Scott Sloan here on 700 WLW. I talk between contests and commercials for podcasts on 700 WLW. And the question this morning is he a patriot taking a stand against lawlessness, or is he just another dumbass with a gun vigilante wannabe? Kyle Rittenhouse trial is going on, and it is absolutely bonkers. The judge in the trial now under fire for making inappropriate comment about Asians and Asian food. The trial is about to wrap up in the fatal shootings of two men and wounding of another in Kenosha last August. You may recall that this was in the wake of the George Floyd case in Minnesota. The protest ensued here in Cincinnati and other places as well. And in Kenosha, police there shot and critically wounded a man by the name of Jacob Blake. And Jacob Blake totally had it coming, but it did not stop the protesters. And on the third night of protests, Kyle Rittenhouse showed up from his place in Illinois and came there willingly and knowingly to Kenosha, Wisconsin, with his long gun, his AR-15. And at one point, he was chased into a parking lot by one young man, or a 36-year-old man, who threw, I guess, a plastic bag at Rittenhouse, and Rittenhouse shot him and tried to run away, and a couple more people were shot in the end result here. But that had been the narrative up until this trial. And that's where things get really interesting, because now the truth is coming out from, of all, oddly enough, people, the men who he shot at, and we have video and everything else, too. So Jason Phillabaum is here to help explain this morning on 700 WLW. Jason, this is one of the most fascinating legal cases I think I've ever seen. When you talk about self-defense and a right to bear arms and protests and things like that, there's so many crazy elements. Like, what's going on with the judge? He's in trouble now for making inappropriate racist comments, of all things?
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating from all angles. I mean, you see prosecutors getting yelled at. You see the judge, I mean, I guess his ringtone went off on Wednesday, and it was God bless the USA, and they're saying that's some kind of Trump anthem, so he's, racist too. I mean, the thing is, they're looking for a scapegoat already, because everyone that looks at this case sees this case being a not guilty for self-defense. Now, there may be an issue of possession of a gun underage. We can talk about that later. But essentially, the big charges that would land him in prison, I think every expert out there, even the ones that want him to be found guilty, are conceding that this is likely going to be a not guilty.
Yep.
And so they're looking for a scapegoat. They're saying the prosecution did a horrible job. They're saying the judge is racist and he's, one-sided. And so that's what I think it is. But for the most part, I thought the judge has done a very good job. The only thing I took a little bit of an issue with was yesterday when he asked in front of the jury if anyone served. Just by happenstance, the only one that stood up was the witness that was going to testify for the defense. And so one could argue that kind of gave him extra credibility. But at the end of the day, he would testify about his service anyway. So I think the judge has done a good job so far.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, that's fair. But here's the thing: is this comes out? It's like, oh yeah, this Rittenhouse, he was he got this gun. He wanted to be a big man. He just started randomly shooting protesters, and then all of a sudden, video comes out. I actually remember seeing the video after this happened, and it's pretty clear that Rittenhouse, this guy who was approaching him, Rosenbaum, had a gun on himself, and he did a quick draw on Kyle Rittenhouse, and Rittenhouse shot the guy in the arm before he could shoot. That seems to be classic self-defense. Why has this whole thing up to this point been perpetuated as an attack by Kyle Rittenhouse if it's pretty clearly a case of self-defense? And on that note, too, why is it even a trial?
Well, first, I remember being on your show and you were outlining the video in detail, almost like they did in the trial. Now, in the trial, they even slowed it down further, but this is textbook self-defense. He is outside. The first thing that he needs to do is attempt to retreat, and that's exactly what he did. He attempted to retreat. He started to run away. Someone threw something at him, hit him in the head, and he ended up knocking and falling down. At that point, even on the very last shot, you see in the video his gun was leveled down. And the guy's walking up to him with his hands up saying, I don't know what he's saying, but his hands are up. And then only at the point that the firearm was pointed at Rittenhouse did Rittenhouse fire. I mean, and that's the other two individuals who were shot as well, same situation. He did not fire until the last possible moment. I mean, that's your textbook self-defense. I mean, you hear of people getting into a fight in a bar and then, not retreating. And that's where they, walk into trouble. I mean, Rittenhouse tried to retreat. He got knocked down, and only when he was down and being surrounded did he then act. And so I think both the prosecution witnesses and defense witnesses all agree with that as well.
I think, too, though, Jason, isn't Wisconsin stand your ground? You don't have a duty to retreat, I don't think, of Wisconsin, do you?
You don't, but stand your ground usually deals a lot with your own personal property.
Okay.
But I do agree so he doesn't have a duty to retreat. But when you talk about retreating, a lot of it comes into, did he do anything to exacerbate the situation? Did he do anything to just start the situation? And I think that's what they just ended on yesterday, were some witnesses that said he was actually trying to de-escalate some of the rioting. And I think there was one example where they were trying to set fire to a gas station, and he was able to convince most of the rioters to walk away, and they started to disperse until the three started coming at him. So I think he did everything to disperse and de-escalate the situation. And then when confronted, he didn't stand his ground. He actually retreated, and only until he was in a position of no retreat did he act.
And the thing, too, is in the police report, it's never mentioned that he'd drawn the gun on Rittenhouse before he was shot. And so on the stand, this is when all this came out, right? There was a moment this past week where he was asked directly, he said, hey, listen, and the guy's arm is all messed up. He doesn't even have a bicep anymore. It's shredded. But he said, he shot you after you pointed your gun at him, right? And he said, no. And then the defense said, here's a picture of you basically pointing your gun, leveling your gun, as you said. And then after that, they said, yeah, you're right. This makes the prosecution look horrible. That should have came out when they questioned him when they were doing their discovery, right? I mean, how does something like that happen?
Absolutely. Well, most cases like this you never see because a grand jury dismisses them before they ever go. Imagine some guy breaks into your house, shoots your dog, you fire one, shoot at that individual as he's coming up the stairs. That is never going to see a courtroom because the prosecutor is going to look at the case and say this is clear self-defense. They're going to present it to a grand jury, and the grand jury is going to say yes, this is self-defense, and then that charge is no billed or essentially not charged. In this case, for whatever reason, and I think you saw it on some of the media outlets, but there was a narrative from the beginning that this white supremacist came running up into Kenosha and wanted to start shooting, all these protesters. And so the prosecutor came out 2 days later and charged them. I mean, there's hours and hours of videos. There was FBI drones. There was all kinds of evidence. And he came out 2 days later to charge this individual instead of taking the time to look at it. And so I think it was a political decision, and I think it's coming back to bite him right now.
Well, I mean, there's the thing, right? The prosecutors are under big pressure to get Kyle Rittenhouse, right? We have mob mentality ruling what the court should be doing, what at least prosecutors should be doing. But right now, all the evidence is on the side of Kyle Rittenhouse and the defense. From the jump, we talked about the video and said it's pretty clear-cut case of self-defense, and yet they prosecuted him for this. Is part of the strategy here for the prosecutor looking so inept? I can't help but think, and this is a little conspiratorial on my part, Jason Phillabaum, is that they're deliberately trying to get this thing thrown out, a mistrial be declared, and a mistrial with prejudice, which means they can't retry it, right?
Right.
Is that what they want? I mean, ultimately, is that their out?
I've seen that argument before, but here's the only problem with that. If they actually get a mistrial right now because of their misconduct, it would be, as you said, with prejudice, which means it's dismissed, it's over, they can't recharge. Let's say, for example, someone accidentally says or does something in court and it's a mistake, and the court just says mistrial, then they could theoretically try him again, and so they get a second bite at the apple to fix their witnesses and so on. In this case, I think the judge made it very clear. If the prosecutor has misconduct and it's intentional, it's not just an accidental, hey, this video showed by accident when you said not to, then it's going to be dismissed with prejudice. So, obviously, if that's what they're trying to do, it's unethical, and they could be disbarred for that. So, I think their goal right now is they're so desperate they're trying everything as opposed to trying to tank the case.
Well, they had to overcharge him. I mean, this guy, he was overcharged to begin with, despite the evidence. And they had all the video evidence, and they saw it was self-defense. But they felt they had overcharged him because of that's what the people wanted.
Exactly. It was a mob mentality charge instead of let me look at everything and decide what to charge him with. There's only two charges that even have a little bit of merit. And the first one is, the one that deals with recklessly firing, because I think he fired two shots that missed.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I still think self-defense flies on that one because he only fired at the last possible minute. He just happened to miss the target. But it did prevent the assault. The guy walked away. So I think that's going to be a not guilty.
Hold on a second. That seems to be something that would be challenged as well. It's like, okay, I'm allowed to defend myself, but if I miss, I'm being reckless. Doesn't that apply to police officers also? I mean, that's just the nature of defending yourself.
Yeah, it'd be a situation where if one person is coming at you, but you still have a distance and you just start firing 10 shots. I think that could be an argument of recklessness. But this is a situation where he was on the ground and the person was, I think, trying to hit him with a skateboard or kick him, and he fired two shots and he just happened to miss.
Yeah.
That's not reckless, and I think the jury's going to agree and find him not guilty. But the one charge that's going to be questionable is whether or not he's guilty of possessing a firearm underage. On its face, he's underage and he has a firearm, so technically it seems a valid charge. However, there is some defenses in Wisconsin that deal with duress and other things. So if he's going into a situation, and evidence showed that he was cleaning up graffiti, he was assisting in medical, and he was also putting out fires, and so he had a firearm to protect himself, one could argue that the duress/self-defense applies to that as well. But even if he's convicted of it, it's a misdemeanor, and it'd be equivalent to criminal damage in our state, which means the most he could serve is I think, 90 days or 9 months or something like that.
Wow. Jason Phillabaum, attorney at law on the show, 700 WLW, the Kyle Rittenhouse case, of course, about to go to the jury, maybe early as Monday, I think. And it's just been such a weird case all along. And the eyes of the nation are on this one, too, for obvious reasons. I just wonder how many people didn't hear the whole story about, what the video actually showed and the testimony in court and all that, because no one in their right mind, unless they had their mind made up already about Kyle Rittenhouse and what he's about, would look at that and go, yeah, he deserves to go to jail. I mean, clearly it was self-defense. One of the arguments that people would make would be, well, here's this guy who comes from Illinois and he brings his gun and he's just looking for trouble. Doesn't that explain the other guys he shot, though, too? Because I understand these aren't all people from Kenosha that are protesting in Kenosha.
Yeah, I think that falls. I've heard that too. He had no right to be there. What was he doing there? I'm like, wait a second. The people that got shot were the ones there putting fires in the gas station. So I think at the end of the day, it's a free country. You can be wherever you want. And the thing that I think helps Rittenhouse the most is they had evidence and video of him cleaning graffiti off. So he's actually doing manual labor to help the local businesses. There's testimony that he was putting out fires that was in businesses, and he also was trying to de-escalate, and then he rendered medical aid. So, I mean, this kid was literally up there helping, and I think every piece of evidence shows that. And not one allegation in this case was that he instigated or started anything malicious. So I think that's why they've, I think, correctly dispelled any kind of he was up there causing trouble. He was up there, I think, trying to help and trying to step in and be, just a neighborly citizen that was helping the businesses that were being destroyed. Yeah. But, when the prosecution makes that argument, I think it's going to fall flat because the evidence shows otherwise.
How did his crying on the stand impact things? Did it help or hurt his case?
Well, if that's all you saw, like LeBron James and some of these others who are tweeting about it, it's a bad look in a 5-second clip. But when you watch the entire testimony, and I think you saw the deepness of the case and the weight of everything, I think it came across as very legitimate. I think it made him look humanized. I mean, this defendant was as good as I've seen any defendant in any case. I mean, it was almost like he had someone in his ear telling him exactly what to say because it was just that perfect. And I think, when he started to cry, it was genuine. It was at the right moment. And, he did try to collect himself for like a minute before that happened. So I think a jury's going to look at that and they're going to feel for him. Well,
it doesn't matter what LeBron James or the Twitterverse or anyone else who's not in the court. It matters what the men and the women in the jury box.
Exactly.
That's all that matters.
Exactly. And I think they're going to see that, and I think they're going to be like, hey, this kid was trying to do good. Maybe he should have stayed home because he was 17, but at the end of the day, he was trying to do good, and he feels awful that he had to do what he had to do. But he did so out of the fear of his life, and therefore I'm going to find him not guilty. I think that's what a jury's going to think.
Yeah, and then God forbid what happens after that with the misinformed idiots out there that just want their pound of flesh regardless of what the facts and how the court of law works. And I always find that interesting is they want the court system to be unbiased and fair, and yet they want the court system to be biased and fair in a case like this.
Exactly. And I think if anyone watched the entire evidence and even if they just read the trial, they would see that every single prosecution witness confirmed that the shots were only fired after some type of assault in Rittenhouse.
What do you think happens when he's exonerated?
I think there's going to be some rioting. I think you're going to have some people come out and act up. I think it'll probably be a little bit less than when someone's shot and killed, because at the end of the day, this is essentially a verdict. But I see people disparaging him throughout the media. I mean, they still continue to do so, even though they've had the evidence to listen to it. So I kind of feel for what happens after he's found not guilty, but I just hope that the rioting stays.
Yeah,
that's obviously what's upsetting.
When do we expect jury's going to get? I thought I heard maybe Monday.
Yeah, they're going to do closing arguments Monday. My guess is that'll take into the afternoon, and so I bet you the jury gets it probably 3-4 o'clock our time, and then they could come back quickly. But my guess is they'll probably at least deliberate into Tuesday, and that way they can make a complete, informed, thoughtful verdict, and then probably come back to.
You think Kyle Rittenhouse totally walks, or as you mentioned, is there going to be something there just to look like they got him on something?
It depends. I mean, if they really feel for him and think that, he walked up there to help and that everything was justified, I think they're going to find him not guilty on everything. If they feel that, he was doing good up there, he only defended himself, but he probably shouldn't have left the house with a gun, I think then they'll find him guilty of the misdemeanor possession. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the judge is going to put him in jail. I think he would get probation.
Yeah, this thing has been a mess. What's the lesson here in this whole thing?
Well, the lesson is even when you defend yourself, you're going to have to face consequences. So you need to be very thoughtful about what your actions are. I've told that to my son because I recently represented someone who acted appropriately with a firearm, but he was charged. Mm-hmm. We ended up having to go to court and have it dismissed that way. So if you are going to use a firearm, you are going to have to face the consequences in court. So you need to make sure that you don't put yourself in a situation that's unwise and come back to bite you.
It really makes you not want to, or at least think long and hard about getting a concealed permit or carrying a weapon. Because, it's like, hey, I need this to protect myself and I feel in danger but man, you look at these cases and you go, is it really worth it? Now, he could have been dead. I mean, he could have been shot to death and this would have been a different story, but I totally see that side of it. You really have to think long and hard and what that responsibility entails.
Right. I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. I mean, if you look at any kind of mass shooting, what stops mm-hmm. is another gun. Yeah. And so, people that are armed can protect themselves and usually do more good than harm, the ones that go through the CCW. But at the end of the day, once you fire that weapon, just like a police officer, when you fire a weapon, your life is turned upside down. Even if you're justified at the end, you're going to have to go through a lot of questions, a lot of investigation, because firing a weapon outside at somebody, even in self-defense, is a very serious act. Yeah,
your house or your car, a different story. A lot lower threshold there, but I totally get it. I think the other lesson too is, I don't know if it'll change prosecutors and the way they behave, but this is it borders on misconduct, is what it does. Jason Phillabaum, let's catch up again early next week. I mean, not Monday, but Tuesday, and see where this thing goes.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Jason Phillabaum on the show. I want to talk about this case because it's you see this and go, wow, it looks like he murdered this guy. And then the facts come out and you go, wait a minute, this is classic self-defense. What are we doing here? And does this make you think twice about carrying a gun? Because if you're carrying a gun and it comes time to use it, man, do you really want that all coming down on you? Quick time out. Your thoughts just ahead. 700.